All right, so welcome to the deep dive, everybody. And today we are diving headfirst into one of the most popular topics in, well, like ufology and all that stuff, gray aliens.
Yeah.
So we asked you guys to send in some sources, and wow, you guys did not disappoint. 3 YouTube videos, all interviews with people who claim to have had experiences with the grays, and they're all doing like past life regression hypnosis.
Right.
So
Right.
they're in that hypnotic state, they're going back, and they're like remembering stuff.
Yeah. Tapping into memories and experiences that they may not be able to access in their normal conscious state.
Exactly. Now, we are not here to convince you to believe everything that you hear. Some of it is pretty out there,
Oh, yeah.
but we are going to sift through it all and see if we can find any like intriguing patterns, any interesting information. So let's dive in, shall we? First things first, where do these grays come from?
Okay.
All 3 of the interviewees in these videos seem to describe a humanoid race, very technologically advanced, that basically self-destructed through genetic manipulation.
It's interesting. That idea of self-destruction, it sort of makes you wonder, right? Like with all our advances in technology and genetic engineering and stuff, are we heading down that same path?
It's a little scary to think about, but yeah, they basically mess themselves up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the interviewees described these ancestors as like these tall, strong beings with blue-green skin and like this powerful energy, which is so different from, that typical image we have of the grays, right?
Right. The big eyes, the frail bodies, the
Yeah, these guys were like ripped.
totally different. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it does make you wonder, is that part of the story of their downfall?
Yeah.
Did they sacrifice physical strength and vitality in
Okay.
pursuit of like logic and intellect?
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then another interviewee even mentioned like a supreme leader in this civilization who was swayed by scientists who were promising enhancements, basically. And that's kind of what led them down the wrong path.
Mm. That's a familiar story, right?
Yeah.
Like the promise of progress, but then it kind of backfires.
Totally. Okay, so let's move on to like gray society. All 3 sources describe them as, well, kind of emotionless.
Yeah.
They operate within a strict hierarchy, and they are super reliant on technology. It seems very, like, efficiency-driven?
Yeah.
Like, control?
Yeah, that lack of emotion is really interesting. And one interviewee even described their dwellings. They're these like capsule-like structures that the Greys can mentally manipulate for travel.
Yeah.
It's almost like they have these personalized portable environments.
Whoa. That's so advanced, but can you imagine a life without joy or sorrow?
Right.
Like, no spontaneity? It really makes you appreciate the full spectrum of human emotions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And speaking of unsettling details, all 3 sources kind of delve into some pretty disturbing claims about the Greys' activities,
Right.
like using cattle for reproduction and experiments on humans.
Yeah. This is where things get a little freaky. One of the interviewees describes the Greys implanting their embryos in cattle alongside the cattle's own offspring. And that leads to like horrific deaths and those unexplained mutilations we hear about.
Right, right.
Okay.
And it's important to remember those cattle mutilations are a real phenomenon.
Right.
But there are lots of different theories about what causes them. Natural predators, even some people say government experiments. I mean, what do you think, having watched these videos?
Honestly, it's hard to say. There's so many things we just don't know.
Mhm.
But it definitely raises some serious questions. Like another interviewee even mentioned specific locations on Earth that have been like designated for gray colonies
Oh.
and that they're like extracting metals from our planet. I mean, why would such a technologically advanced species need our resources?
That's a good question. Maybe their technology has limitations, or maybe they're not actually in control. Another interviewee suggested that maybe they're not acting independently, that they're taking orders from an even more powerful species.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like there's this whole other layer of activity happening that we're just not aware of.
Right.
Okay, let's shift gears for a second.
Yeah.
All 3 interviewees explicitly state that grays lack souls. And that is a concept, central to us.
Yeah.
Just like consciousness, individuality, all that.
It really gets into some deep philosophical territory. One interviewee even talked about the Greys losing their original plasma essence, which they think was like a more advanced form of consciousness. And they lost it through their genetic tampering. Like they traded their souls for technology.
Whoa, that's a really heavy thought.
Mhm.
It makes you wonder, what does it even mean to have a soul? And how would a species without one perceive the world? Like, how would they interact with us?
Right. And, one interviewee even described what happens when a gray dies.
Yeah.
Their accumulated information gets absorbed back into a central source for future use.
Wait, so it's like a hive mind?
It almost sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about where they might have come from, their society, even some pretty disturbing stuff they might be doing. But I keep coming back to, like, what is it about us? What's so interesting to these grays about humans?
Right. That is the million-dollar question. And I think these interviews, they offer some clues, some pretty disturbing ones, too. One interviewee describes seeing the grays trying to like, recreate their original form, like using human DNA.
Wait, so they're using us as like a blueprint to rebuild themselves. That's kind of creepy.
Yeah, a little bit.
But then another interviewee suggested their interactions with humans go way back, like maybe even to the time of Atlantis. I mean, if that's true, they must have some long-term plan going on, right?
It's definitely possible. I mean, think about it. If they don't really have emotions, they don't have that creative spark that we do. Maybe they see our history, our culture, as something to study and maybe even to exploit.
Like they're trying to understand this puzzle they just can't figure out. And that's why they're so focused on, like, our minds, our emotions, even our, reproductive processes.
Yeah, trying to figure out what makes us tick.
Totally.
Yeah.
And maybe it ties back to that whole idea of them wanting to get back their plasma essence. Like maybe they think they can get it from us somehow.
It's a wild thought, but it makes you wonder, right?
Okay. This is where things get really out there. Remember how one of the interviewees mentioned the Greys being set here as, like, workers by these more powerful reptilian beings?
Yeah, that definitely complicates things.
Right. So are the Greys even calling the shots? Or are they just pawns in some cosmic game being run by these reptilians? And where do we fit in?
So many questions.
I know.
But it does make you think about the possibility that there are these other beings out there with their own agendas, their own goals.
Right, like we're suddenly extras in some cosmic play, and we didn't even know there was a show going on. So, okay, let's try and sum up what we've got so far. We've got these Greys, super advanced technology, but they're obsessed with humans for reasons we just don't get. Maybe they're trying to get back what they lost. Maybe they work for these reptilians. Or maybe it's something totally different.
It really is a mystery. And I think to get to the bottom of it, we have to be open to all the possibilities, no matter how weird they sound.
Okay. So with all this in mind, where does that leave us humans? Are we just lab rats? Fuel for their spaceships? Or is there something else going on?
Right. The big question. If they are trying to regain what they lost, could we help them? Or are we going to end up getting exploited? Our emotions, our creativity, maybe even our souls?
It's like we're walking this tightrope over a cosmic abyss, One false move and that's it.
Yeah.
But hey, maybe we're tougher than we look. We've survived a lot as a species.
We have. That's true. Maybe it's those qualities, our resilience, our adaptability, our capacity for love and compassion. Maybe that's what makes us so valuable to them.
Maybe we're not just pawns in their game. Maybe we've got a bigger part to play in all of this that we just haven't figured out yet. But that's a whole other deep dive. My brain needs a break from alien talk for now.
I hear you. But I think this has been a really valuable conversation. It's made us question everything we thought we knew about the universe.
Yeah.
And about ourselves.
Yeah, that's what I love about these deep dives. It's not about finding all the answers. It's about asking the right questions.
Exactly. And who knows? Maybe those questions will lead to some pretty amazing discoveries down the road.
Totally. All right, folks, that's it for part 2 of our Gray Alien Deep Dive. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
So we spent the last 2 parts really getting into the weeds with these gray aliens. Origins, their society, all that weird stuff they're supposedly up to. But the big question that's still hanging out there is, like, what do they actually want? Why are they here?
Right. What's their motivation? And I got to say, these interviews give us some pretty interesting ideas. One interviewee described the Greys almost like energy vampires.
Energy vampires. Yeah. Draining our life force to sustain themselves.
Okay, that is a little creepy. Like, are we just batteries to them? Is that all we are?
It's a disturbing thought, for sure.
Yeah.
But it does make you think, what is it about human energy that's so valuable to them? Is it just like a biological thing? Or is there something more to it?
Okay, now that's where things get even weirder. Because another interviewee mentioned that their plasma essence, the thing they lost, remember, through all that genetic messing around,
Right.
they think it was connected to human emotions.
Interesting. So maybe it's not just our energy they're after, but the actual essence of our emotional experiences.
Yeah, like they're trying to download our feelings.
It's a strange concept, I know. But
Mhm.
think about it. If they're all about logic and they can't really feel emotions the way we do, maybe they see human emotions as this, like, missing piece,
Yeah.
something they need to understand.
Right, like they're looking at us going, what is this thing that makes these humans feel so much? How do we get some of that?
Exactly.
Although there's also, like, the darker side of that there.
Oh, yeah.
What if they're not trying to understand our emotions, but, like, weaponize them? Use our love, our fear against us?
That's a pretty scary thought.
Yeah. But, it wasn't all doom and gloom. One interviewee actually suggested that maybe the Greys are just trying to survive, that they're interested in us because they're desperate to find a way to, keep their species going.
Hmm. Okay, that's a more sympathetic take, I guess. They're not evil masterminds. They're more like refugees.
Right. Desperate refugees looking for a lifeline. But that still doesn't answer the big question, like, what would it even look like for humans to help the Greys? Would we become, like, partners, or would we end up having to make some serious sacrifices?
It's tough to say.
Mm.
And it's important to remember, even within these interviews, there are conflicting viewpoints. Some people saw the Greys as benevolent, even like guides. Others were terrified of them, thought they were manipulative and dangerous.
So what's the bottom line? Are they friends or foes? Saviors or parasites? Honestly, I'm more confused now than when we started.
And that's okay. The truth
Mhm.
is, we may never fully understand their motivations,
Yeah.
what they really want. But I think that's part of what makes them so fascinating. They represent the unknown, the mysterious, this possibility that we're not alone. And even if they just bring up more questions than answers, they force us to think about some pretty big stuff,
Mm.
about ourselves, our place in the universe, what it even means to be conscious.
Wow. Yeah, you're right. This deep dive, man, it's been a wild ride. Started with some YouTube videos, and now we're talking about, like, the fate of humanity.
It's amazing where these conversations can go, huh? Who knows? Maybe one day we'll have real proof, real evidence about the Greys. But until then, all we can do is explore the possibilities and wonder about, what role we humans might play in their story.
Absolutely. So, listeners, that's it for our deep dive into the world of gray aliens. It's been strange, a little scary, and definitely thought provoking. We've covered their potential origins, their society, those controversial activities, and of course, the biggest mystery of all, their motivations.
We've encountered stories about advanced technology, manipulation, even the idea that there's a bigger cosmic game going on that we're just not aware of. We may not have walked away with all the answers, but I think we have a much better understanding now of just how vast the universe is and all the possibilities that are out there.
And that, I think, is the most important thing to remember. Keep an open mind, question everything, and never stop exploring. Who knows, maybe one day we'll finally uncover the truth about the Greys. Until then, thanks for joining us on the deep dive.